Hello! I forgot to record an introduction to this video, so I'm doing it now in a separate place than where you'll see me when we are talking about 6 cold climate permaculture plants. So I have been interested in permaculture for about 5 years now. I am one of those pandemic gardeners who started taking an interest in gardening and herbalism and food foraging around that time. And in those 5 years, I have always been very frustrated that while there are many channels that cover permaculture and making food forests, a lot of them are catered to people in warmer climates. So I will be starting a video series where we will be looking at cold climate permaculture, perfect for those in zones 2 through 5. These are plants that will come back year after year, whether they are self-seeding annuals, and many of them also double as potential feed for chickens and meat rabbits, which I think is going to become a very popular topic as we find that raising our own birds and raising our own meat becomes more economically viable. Anyway, I'm looking forward to sharing some of my insights on these 6 plants. We'll talk about their growth habits, where to buy them, as well as how to collect seeds yourself. Many of these are really easy to find out in the wild, and you can, as long as you know about the fruiting bodies, you can easily collect seeds and start them from seed completely free. And then finally, we'll also talk about the health benefits. Many of these plants double as not only food, but as medicine, and they're just a great addition to any garden for numerous reasons that we'll get into in the video today. So thank you for being here. My name is Danae from the Acadian Garden and Apothecary. Let's get started. So I guess we should probably start by talking about what permaculture is. There's quite a few definitions of it. I would say the best way that I can describe permaculture is that it is the concept of adding permanent or semi-permanent plants into an agricultural ecosystem that's designed to do a number of different things. It can be designed to reduce the amount of effort that goes into cultivating plants for eating. It can be used to improve soil health and add diversity to the garden. Permaculture plants can provide great food sources for wildlife as well, or if you have meat rabbits or poultry, that's another great way to supplement their diet. And in general, permaculture systems make a garden more climate resistant. So if you have things that are hardy and survive year after year, whether it's cold or there's a drought or whatever it might be, things that can devastate annual crops, perennial crops and permaculture plants are generally much more resistant to the fluctuations that happen year after year. So permaculture is not like your annual vegetable gardening. It can take many years to establish because often what you're working with are fruiting trees and bushes and other plants that just take a while to get established. Generally, when you're working with something like a perennial, it's not like your annuals where you can start those from seed and expect in one growing season for them to grow, produce food, produce fruit and seed, and then start that process all over again. Many perennials can take as much as 2 to 5 years before they start producing their first fruits, some even longer than that. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're wanting to start a permaculture garden, the best thing that you can do is start as soon as possible. Have realistic expectations. It's probably going to take a few years for some of these plants to start giving you a return on your investment. First up is Sunchokes. Helianthus tuberosus is the scientific name. They're also commonly known as Jerusalem artichokes. So the funny thing about Jerusalem artichokes, they are neither from Jerusalem and they are also not artichokes. They are not in the artichoke family. I'm not sure how that name came to be. Maybe if you're a history buff, you can tell me. But what I would say about Jerusalem artichokes, and we're going to call them sunchokes for the rest of the video, is I didn't realize how common they were in my area until I learned about the plant and decided to order some online. And then when I saw a picture of these sunchokes, I realized that I've been seeing sunchokes in people's yards for years. I mean, I could just drive down my little countryside road and see patches of them growing. This is a very prolific plant that spreads incredibly easily, and it looks like a sunflower with a small sunflower head. So the part of the Jerusalem artichoke that you eat is the tuber. Some folks will say that it tastes like potato. I try to lean away from comparing the flavor of things. One, because I haven't tried Jerusalem artichoke yet. This is my first year growing it. But also, I think sometimes we can set up expectations for how things are supposed to taste. And I think it would be better to just try it out yourself, whether you like to boil it, mash it, or fry it. I think it's good to experiment with this and see what works best for you. So let's talk a little bit about how Jerusalem artichokes grow. So this is a plant that does well in zones 3 through 9. So if you are in a cold climate, this is something that you can try out as a permaculture crop. It can spread aggressively, like I mentioned before, so it might be best to grow it in a container or have it in an area that you can easily keep controlled, because these will spread. Even if you dig up the tubers, just the tiniest bit of tuber left behind will grow into a whole new patch of sunchokes. Same goes if you are throwing bits and pieces into your compost. Wherever that compost goes, you're going to have some sunchokes growing as well. So what's great about this permaculture plant is that it is extremely drought tolerant and it grows well in poor soils. So if you are just starting your garden, or you have a patch of land that hasn't been broken in yet, you haven't added your soil amendments and compost, you can probably plant sunchokes there and they'll do absolutely fine. In my garden, I've decided to grow our sunchokes in a tall raised bed. We are using it not only as a place to grow our sunchokes, but also sunchokes will get really tall. So the aerial part of the plant can grow as much as 3 to 5 feet, I believe. So you can actually make a pretty nice hedge out of these plants, and that's essentially what we'll be using it for. We're bordering it up on the edge of our property to create kind of a privacy barrier of sorts. Now, because I am growing sunchokes for the first time, I am not an expert on this plant at all. However, I did find a YouTuber with great information on this plant called Sage Smoke Survival. I will link that channel in the description below and you can check that out. He has a lot of great information about the nutrition of the plant, how to grow it, and he also mentions that he feeds sunchokes to his meat rabbits, and that is one of their primary food sources. I did also look up a video to see if sunchokes can be fed to chickens, and the answer is yes. You can feed them the aerial parts and the tubers, and they will happily eat them. Great crop for people, great crop for your animals, grows easily even in poor soils. Definitely recommend checking out this plant. All right, next on our list, ground cherries, also known as husk cherries, or I think pineapple cherries. It's got a few names, but if you want to make sure you get the correct plant, the scientific name is Phylacis pruinosa. So unlike the other permaculture plants in this video, this is an annual, it's not a perennial, but it is a self-seeding annual, meaning that it readily seeds itself in the same general area year after year. So this is one I planted last year, and I did have a chance to enjoy the husk cherries in the same season, and this is a really cool plant. So it's a member of the nightshade family, like tomatoes, and it has quite a good growth range. You can grow them in zones 4 through 8, and there are some heat-resistant varieties that can grow as far as zone 12. And that's part of what I find kind of cool about this plant. While it is a member of the tomato family, it is more cold hardy than a tomato. It won't survive frost or anything like that, but unlike a tomato, which is not going to come back on its own if you drop a tomato on the ground, husk cherries will come back year after year, so that's pretty neat. Another important thing to keep in mind with this plant, all parts of the plant except for the berry are toxic. That goes for people as well as most livestock and animals. You don't want to eat any of that. You're not going to feel very good if you do. And if you eat this fruit before it's completely ripe, and by that I mean it needs to be yellow and not have any hints of green, it produces a similar, perhaps the same chemical as you would find in a green potato. So it is toxic if you eat it before it's completely ripe. This plant is very prolific. I planted, I think four husk cherries last year in the back part of my garden. Very poor soils, haven't planted anything there before except for like a few cover crops. I think we did a couple rounds of maybe buckwheat there before I finally planted in it. And it did really well. It had no problem producing hundreds and hundreds of ground cherries. And you can just pick them right off the ground, throw them in a bowl. They make great conversation starters because most people haven't seen a fruit like that before. I remember my dad was visiting. We were having sort of a family reunion last July, and he almost ate the husk because he wasn't quite sure what to do with the husk cherry. Luckily, I caught him in time, but it has a very unique flavor. Part of the reason they call it the pineapple cherry is because it sort of tastes like a pineapple. It doesn't taste like a tomato. It's much more sweet. Some of them even have a little bit of a cinnamony flavor. Depends on the variety. But they are a great treat. You can turn them into jams and jellies. And they also have a lot of great health benefits. So I'll link the studies in the description if you want to look at the literature yourself. But there have been a few scientific studies that show the consumption of ground cherries can help with things like regulating insulin production after a meal, and they also contain cancer-fighting compounds. So they found that certain constituents in husk cherries can help prevent the growth of cancer cells. Very interesting stuff. Definitely something I wouldn't mind having in my regular diet. And while not everyone is super familiar with husk cherries, there are actually quite a few places that sell the seeds. So you can buy husk cherries, many different varieties on Johnny Seeds, or another great place to check out is Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. That's their company name, though their website might be rareseeds.com. So this next permaculture plant might come as a surprise to you. Burdock. Arctium lapa. You might already be familiar with burdock for the burrs that it produces that get stuck on clothing, pet fur. It pretty much sticks to everything. This is actually a wonderful permaculture plant that is commonly eaten in different parts of Asia. It's often prepared in a dish called Kimpira gobo. So this is a popular Japanese cuisine, I believe, that is made out of burdock root. So a little bit about burdock. It's extremely cold hardy, up to zones 2 through 10, and many parts of the plant are edible, though it depends on the season. So make sure that you do your research before you just go and start eating burdock. There are toxic lookalikes such as rhubarb. You can eat burdock leaves, but you should definitely not eat rhubarb leaves. So just make sure that you are very well experienced in plant ID or that you refer to an expert before trying this. But you can eat burdock leaves when they're young. They get a little bitter as they get older, but the most substantial part of the burdock that is most commonly used in cuisines is the taproot. Burdock has an extremely vigorous long taproot. When I picked it last year, I want to say the taproot that I pulled, I mean, it must have been like this long. I don't know what is that, like 3 feet maybe? They can get very, very long. This is also a plant that is cultivated. So if you wanted to grow burdock and grow it similar to, say, a carrot or a parsnip, you can train it to grow a long, straight taproot that makes it much easier to prepare for culinary uses. So I won't go too deep into the medicinal properties. I already have a video that covers burdock's medicinal and culinary uses extensively, and you can check that out up here. But what I will say about it in this video, burdock, much like dandelion root, is an incredible detoxifier for the body. It is a liver tonic, a kidney tonic, a blood purifier, and it can do amazing things for your skin's health. So if you're interested in learning about the medicinal benefits of burdock, like I said, check out that burdock video. You definitely won't regret it. It is becoming a much more popular food alternative. And it's one of those plants that you can harvest in early spring. Once you see the small fuzzy leaves of burdock coming up, you can very quickly identify where a mature plant might be buried, dig it up out of the ground, and now you have a food source before most things have even started growing, much, much longer before you have a chance to start harvesting your annuals. Excellent survival crop, and it tastes pretty good if you know how to prepare it. I will be doing a video soon on how to make Kimpira gobo, so if you're interested in checking that out, definitely subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so that you're notified when that video comes out. Now, as far as where to get burdock, I would recommend strictly medicinal seeds. However, this is an incredibly common plant throughout North America, so if you want to just step out into the countryside and look for those characteristic burrs, Inside those burrs are the seeds, and you could probably easily start your own batch of burdock. It spreads pretty readily, so I'm sure if you wanted to attempt growing it just from the burrs themselves, you would probably have luck. So that's another great way to get seeds for free. Fourth on our list is sea buckthorn, also known as seaberry. The scientific name is, I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this, Hypophyte rhamnoides. So I'm really excited about adding this plant to my garden this year. I have ordered 3 seaberry trees, young seaberry trees. I think they're 2 to 3 feet tall, and they are extremely hard to find and order in North America. Where I'm ordering them, they're usually sold out. It's Rain Tree Nurseries where I was able to buy them. This is a plant that is a little bit controversial. It is on some invasive species list for certain states, including my state of Maine. I have a bit of a controversial opinion when it comes to invasive species, and while I do have an education and a background in ecology, my opinion often doesn't line up with the popular opinion on invasives and whether or not they should be in our gardens at all. Invasive plants are incredibly resilient plants, which I feel is important for combating things like climate change and making more resilient environments. However, they can have detrimental effects in the short term on different ecosystems depending on the type of plant. But you should know that many of the medicinal plants I talk about on this channel are invasives that have been introduced to the United States. Do your own research and you can make a decision about whether or not you want to add a plant to your garden. Just be considerate of those factors. So anyway, back to seaberry or sea buckthorn. So this is a small tree, and what's fascinating about it is it produces a small orange berry that has a citrus-like flavor, which is fantastic because where I live, cold climates, we don't typically have access to citrus type plants. I can't grow lemons and limes up in my area, but I can grow seaberry. So seaberry is cold hardy down to zone 3, very, very cold tolerant. And like many of the plants on this list, they do very well in poor soils. Another fantastic quality of this plant is it's drought resistant, it's heat tolerant, and it's also salt tolerant. So if you live near the coast and you struggle with, salt in your soils, whether from sea spray or just leachate, this is a plant that will do perfectly fine in a slightly brackish environment. So why would you want to have seaberry other than the fact that it's resistant and it produces a citrus-like berry? Well, this citrus-like berry is high in vitamin C, but it's also high in something that you don't typically find in berries, which is omega fatty acids. So this is an oily berry. In fact, the oils are sometimes pressed and used to make different skincare products. So this is one that's interesting to me, both medicinally, but also as a source of a unique flavor that I normally don't have in my garden that I think would be fantastic in teas and maybe for making juices and jams. So a few notes about growing seaberry. This is not a self-pollinated plant. You do need to have male and female plants. So if you do decide to go and order these online, make sure you have at least one male. One male plant can pollinate up to 10 females in a given area. So you don't need as many males as you need females, but you do need to have at least one. So just one more note about seaberry. This is also something you can feed to your chickens. In fact, there's a lot of health benefits using this as a poultry supplement, including increasing egg production. So I will link the website that provides more information on this, as well as links to the original studies. All right, number 5. Number 5 is the Lowbush Cranberry, also known as Vaccinium macrocarpum. So I ordered 3 Lowbush cranberries. The specific variety is Stevens cranberry, I believe, and these also came from Rain Tree Nursery. So I'm really excited about these. I've always wanted to grow cranberries. I love cranberry sauce. I love drinking straight up cranberry juice. When I was in college, I liked to make myself a cranberry gin and tonic. That was fantastic. And this is also a plant that's great nutritionally and medicinally. It's high in vitamin C, it's high in antioxidants, it's great for urinary health and can help with things like urinary tract infections. and it is also cold hardy. So many people think that you can only grow cranberries in marshy environments because of that classic cranberry bog look where they flood an area so that it's easier for them to harvest the cranberries. You can grow cranberries in just a normal garden. You just want to make sure that the soils are conditioned correctly. This is a plant that prefers slightly acidic soils and more moisture than most plants would typically have. They do like that peat moss mix, but you can also replicate this with any high quality soil layer that's full of organic matter and kept well watered. This is a plant that's cold hardy from zones 3 to 9. And the last plant on our list for potential permaculture additions is Staghorn Sumac, also known as Rus typhina. So just to get this out of the way, this is not poisonous. This is not like your poison sumac. I'm not even sure if they're in the same family. I don't believe they're even in the same family, but they are both called sumac because of that sumac-like leaf shape. So this sumac, Rus typhina, is I don't want to call it a small tree because it can get quite tall, but it's a brittle ornamental tree, let's put it that way. While I absolutely love this plant, I do have a love-hate relationship with it. It is a plant that spreads easily through its root system, and it will interfere with things like raised beds or decks. So just something to keep in mind, wherever you plant this, it is going to spread through its root system. So be prepared either to be constantly mowing an area to control the spread of the plant, or strategically place it somewhere where it's going to have adequate competition with much larger trees. So one of the things I love about this plant is its tropical feel. It is absolutely gorgeous during the summer, and you can prune it to kind of make a little canopy that you can walk under for shade. We planted some sumac trees where we have our hillbilly hot tub, and it provides ample amount of shade during the summer and looks beautiful, especially when it starts to produce its berries. So the berries are the primary part that most folks will eat. You can also eat the inner bark of the plant, and is in fact called a delicacy by certain indigenous cultures. I haven't tried it yet myself, but I'm interested in trying it. I might taste test some of those root sprouts and see what all the fuss is about. So I'll let you know how that goes. But primarily the berries are used. So these crimson berries grow in clusters called drupes, and they look like just big red candles on top of the tree. Absolutely beautiful once they're in full bloom and they start to really mature and redden. And the berries themselves have not too much of a flavor, and it's actually the small hairs on the berries that contain the most flavor. It has a lemony taste to it that can be turned into sumac spice or used to make what is called a sumac lemonade. And you can watch my video right up here to learn how to make your own sumac lemonade. Staghorn sumac berries have many health benefits that are well documented and studied. They are rich in tannins, flavonoids, and anthocyanins, which are all great for reducing inflammation in the body. This is something that you can use as a spice or add to a drink, and there are studies that have shown that it's able to help reduce muscle soreness after an exercise if you drink this regularly. This is a plant that you can easily propagate through root cuttings, so I don't know of anywhere that you can buy this online, but it's very common growing along sandy roadsides. All you need to do is take a good size cutting, maybe about this big, of the roots, plant that in the ground, and as long as it's not too late in the season and it has a chance to root down properly and send up new shoots, you can easily start your own little patch of sumac. In fact, that's how we started ours. We had a few growing right in front of our windowsill one year. Sumac is also wonderful for wildlife, so if that is important in your permaculture plan, making sure that you're giving back to nature. I have seen a number of different species of birds, from robins to cardinals, blue jays, a few other birds I don't recognize, but I see them eating sumac berries regularly, especially at this time of year when we're getting close to spring and some of those migratory birds are returning. That becomes an important food source while they're still waiting for the snow to melt. I've also seen squirrels enjoying some sumac berries as well, so very popular among the wildlife. Great plant to have in your garden if that's important to you. One final note about Staghorn sumac: if you have a cashew allergy, this is a plant that you should avoid. It is in the cashew family and can cause similar allergic reactions. So let me know what you think. Have you heard of any of these plants before, or is this your first time? Are you familiar with growing, cultivating, and even cooking any of the plants that I mentioned? I would love to hear more about your experience One of my favorite things is learning new recipes from folks that are in this community. People have such creative ways of cooking things that I would have never thought of, and sometimes they taste absolutely amazing, and it can really give you a much greater appreciation for these foods when you know how to properly cook them. So feel free to share your own opinions in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait for springtime to come and we can all be out in the garden together. So until next time.